So we're starting at the bottom of page 158, just a little segue um, that we read last time too. As the aspirant progresses on the spiritual path, a fundamental modification in the structure of his or her sanskaras begins to occur. Whereas before, the expression of one sanskara in the world of form resulted in the inevitable creation of fresh sanskaras, this self-perpetuating process now begins to draw to a close. As the aspirant's assertive lower self begins to be removed, the tension of the existing impressions can be released or expressed without the creation of fresh sanskaras. At first slowly, but with gradually increasing speed, the old sanskaras are spent with less and less attendant creation of fresh sanskaras. With the final cessation of the formation of fresh sanskaras, all past impressions naturally unwind to the finish. And then, free of all impressions, the soul stands fully self-conscious forever. The various routes by which the individual may start on the journey are many indeed. Several of the principal ones are referred to as Dhyana Marga, or the way of knowledge, Karma Marga, or the way of action, Bhakti Marga, or the way of devotion, and Yoga Marga, or the way of mental and physical discipline. Each of these paths may be regarded as a routine, dutifully followed and unthinkingly executed. Or it may be, transmuted into a path of living discovery by having become the focal point of the aspirant's entire being. Dhyana Marga, or the way of knowledge, may consist in the pursuit of speculative philosophy, either through independent thinking or in the study of existing systems of philosophic thought. Or it may be transformed through concentrating the mind and the entire personality on the truths hitherto mentally grasped. Such deep meditation of spiritual realities is aimed at assimilating their inner meaning and results in lifting them out of the category of intellectual playthings into animating principles which invade and gradually transmute the innermost core of the aspirant. Karma Marga, or the way of action, may normally consist of a life of service to humanity, a life in which effort is expended to improve the well-being of people through social, political, or physical projects. In such service, the motivating factor is usually a sense of duty, but often it is corrupted by the desire to achieve power, fame, or other personal gain. Regardless, the way of action creates in its wake many joys and many sorrows, much exultation, and much disillusionment. It often creates further bindings for the soul and is frequently fraught with nagging restlessness due to the worker's expectation of specific results. As often as not, it results in enlargement of the ego rather than in its deflation. On the other hand, internalizing this same way of action renders it pure, safe, and spontaneous. In such case, the aspirant may still be engaged in humanitarian work, but that work is no longer entangled in personal ambition. Such service is not a mechanical response to a sense of duty, but a spontaneous expression of voluntary love. Through it, man or woman gradually becomes pure, is free from many limitations, freed from many limitations, and finds peace of being as he or she becomes wholly detached from the results of their actions. Under the enlightening influence of inner understanding, the life of action helps in the elimination of the ego mind and quickens the pace to attainment of truth consciousness. The inner spiritual path is irreplaceable because of the welling up of divine love, which occurs during its course. Even in Bhakti Marga, as the ordinary religious man or woman of the world practices it, this upwelling of love is absent. It is only in the inner transformation of the way of devotion that the aspirant is initiated into that spontaneous love which needs no outer observance for its realization. Such love springs up spontaneously in the heart under the quickening touch of the Master's grace. Marian, could you unmute and continue, please?
Yoga Marga, or the way of mental and physical discipline, is also capable of producing a complete transformation in the aspirant by unfolding the inner path of gnosis or irfan in him. In his attempt to gain control over mind and body, the worldly man often resorts to these yogic practices and austerities to achieve the discipline he covets. There are three main systems of yoga. One, Hatha Yoga, which consists of self-mortifying asceticism and physical austerities. Two, Raja Yoga, which is the process of mental self-denial through resistance to all desires. And three, the positive system of pranayama, which consists in the awakening of the Kundalini and meditation through an ascending order of exercises. It is characteristic of all the different systems of yoga that they emphasize the purification and preparation of bodies or vehicles of consciousness, rather than concerning themselves directly with the onward movement of consciousness itself. The contribution of yoga is comparable to that of the physician who removes the ailments which have developed in the functioning of the internal organs of the body. Of the different systems of yoga, Hatha yoga is the most superficial. The self-imposed austerities represent, in a sense, a pressuring of God or of a God-realized master for either power or realization. It is a kind of bargaining in which penance is undertaken with an ulterior motive. It can hardly be called self-sacrifice, for the things apparently denied oneself are denied in order that one might have something else. Ultimately, it reduces to intelligent selfishness. Spirituality, as love, can never be achieved through any type of coercion. If spiritual attainment should be sought in this manner, the person invites harm upon himself rather than spiritual benefit, and restriction of power rather than expansion. In brief, he gets exactly the opposite of what he had sought. The yoga of mental self-denial through resistance to all desires, Raja Yoga, is chiefly negative in its method. It consists in a concentrated attempt to be freed from all good and bad wants which plague the mind. In following this method, the individual attempts to avoid all wants and desires. This in itself is a form of wanting, for it is wanting a state of wanting nothing. However, this form of yoga, when carried to its extreme limit, can result in the subjective annihilation of the ego structure of desires. The positive system of yoga, consisting in the practice of pranayama, breathing exercises, gives increased control over prana, or the vital energy. It also includes the awakening of the kundalini, of the latent spiritual power in man, and is supplemented by an ascending order of meditation exercises. But in this yoga, there is the danger of the aspirant having a fall and retrogressing spiritually if he misuses his awakened occult powers. This he inevitably does if these powers are awakened before he is spiritually ready. The aspirant is therefore well advised not to take up this positive system of yoga, except under the direct supervision of a master. When aroused under the proper guidance of a master, however, the awakened Kundalini can lead the aspirant to the occult Riddhi-Siddhi powers of the fourth plane, which is described later. In any case, the highest attainment possible through pranayama, the breath exercise phase of the positive system of yoga, is that of the objective or semi-illumination of the fifth plane. Both the fifth and sixth planes of gnosis are states of illumination, but they may be either subjective or objective, depending upon the manner in which the illumination has been achieved. The positive systems of yoga lead to the objective illumination of the fifth plane. But such objective illumination can only be termed semi-illumination, for in it, God is experienced as without, and therefore sight of him is eclipsed or obscure. In contrast, subjective or full illumination is brought about through the inner path of love, which brings about a blending of devotion, knowledge, and action. Such subjective illumination in the fifth and sixth planes has absolutely no element of obscurity, because God is experienced within. In a sense, God is nearer the subjective realm than the objective, although ultimately he is inclusive of both as well as beyond both. Such are the traditional paths by which the aspirant may launch upon his quest for realization. The particular route by which the worldly man will start his search is determined by his temperament and environment. But when he enters the inner spiritual path, he seeks the truth of consciousness as it is. This quest for the real compels him to transcend the obscurities of the mind and the twistings which arise from temperament and environment. Even as the inner truths unfold, these factors continue to limit his consciousness. But he is now impelled to make a conscious effort to free himself from their entanglements. The first evidence in the aspirant of freedom from limitations imposed by the subjective mind is that he begins to understand without prejudice his own nature and environment. To react intelligently to environment is impossible unless its true meaning is understood. For example, a man habitually inclined to react cynically to all that is good in other people inevitably fails to appreciate the latent good in those whom he contacts. Consequently, he not only misses the pleasure of harmonious relationship with them, but is also prevented from utilizing the potential value of such experience for the good of others.
Thanks, Marian. Mahu, would you care to continue?
Yes. Similarly, if a man erects his projects on an incorrect evaluation of environment, the energy which he invests in them may be wasted in spite of his enthusiasm. Correct judgment of environment and people is an important requisite of fruitful and right action. It requires in the aspirant both the capacity to rise above his personal prejudices and more important to understand them. Judgment befogged by personal bias renders right action impossible. To illustrate further, if the individual projects the content of his own subjective desires upon another human being, seeing in that person the fulfillment of his emotional longings, and if he acts under the impulse of that blind driving force, then disappointment is inevitable. He has only seen in the other what is in himself. There can be no adequate response from the object of one's desire under such emotional compulsion, and therefore no fulfillment. So true understanding of environment is as necessary for attaining soundness and depth of feeling as it is for engendering efficient creative action. Such true understanding is achieved only when the aspirant frees himself from temperamental compulsion. The personal factors which cause the worldly man to look upon the various approaches towards truth as widely divergent or even mutually antagonistic are gradually transcended on the path. Eventually, the ways coverage and their interdependence is revealed to the aspirant. Okay, I repeat this. Eventually, the ways converge and their interdependence is revealed to the aspirant. He sees that every way implements the others. Bhakti or devotion becomes the expression of truth, true feeling. The way of knowledge becomes assimilation of that same truth, true understanding, and the way of action is seen to be the result of the will being actuated by that very same truth. In the worldly stage, man is drawn more to one way than to others because of the particular limitations of his character and environment. On the path, they blend with each other as the aspirant gradually succeeds in emancipating himself from the specific restrictions of mind and heart. Even the day self-imposed asceticisms of yoga flower as the individual realizes divine love as he follows the inner path.
So that word is dry.
Okay.
Even the dry.
Yeah, even the dry, self-imposed asceticism of yoga flower as the individual realizes divine love as he follows the inner path. It is possible by following any of the ways just discussed to lose the individual mind, the lower self, and yet retain complete consciousness. However, this is only true when the zenith is reached through the inner path. The easiest and safest way to lose one's finite ego is by surrendering completely to the perfect master or to the God-man avatar. who is consciously one with truth. In them, the past, present, and future of the individual are drowned, and during his implicit obedience to the master, he is no longer bound by those actions, good and bad. I repeat this again. In them means the avatar or God or perfect master. The past, present, and future of the individual are drowned, and during his implicit obedience to the master, he is no longer bound by those actions, good and bad. Such complete surrenderance is in itself complete freedom. Of all the high roads which take the pilgrim directly to his divine destination, the quickest lies through the God-man, Christ, Messiah, Avatar. In the God-man, God reveals himself in all his glory, with his infinite power, unfathomable knowledge, inexpressible bliss, and eternal existence. The path through the God-man is available to all those who approach him in complete surrenderance and unwavering faith. To the one who has unfaltering love for the God-man, the way to abiding truth is clear and safe. Such a one must waste no time playing with things that do not matter. Loyalty to the unchangeable truth, guided by enduring love, is the simple way that leads to God and abiding peace. Although God is more easily accessible to ordinary man through the God-man, yet God also reveals himself through his impersonal aspect, which is beyond name, form, and time. Regardless of whether it is to be through his personal or his impersonal aspect, it is necessary that the aspirant seek him and surrender to him in love. When the aspirant contemplates only God without the second, there is no room for love for God or longing for God. The individual has the intellectual conviction that he is God. Yet in order to experience that state in actuality, the aspirant goes through intense concentration or meditation on the thought, quote, I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am neither this nor that, I am God. In exceptional cases, the individual may experience through meditation what he has assumed himself to be. This mode of experiencing God is not only difficult, but dry.
Thanks, Mahu. Kathy, do you want to care to read? If you do, unmute.
Yes, I will try. I'll see how my vision does today. Progress is more realistic and enjoyable when there is an ample play of love and devotion to God. This postulates temporary and apparent separateness from God and longing to unite with him. Such provisional and apparent separateness from God is reflected in the Sufi concept states of Hama az ust, or everything is from God, and Hama dost, everything is for the beloved God.
Hamadust.
Hamadust.
Uh-huh.
In each of these concepts, the individual perceives that his separateness from God is only temporary and apparent, and he seeks to restore this lost unity with God through intense love, which consumes all duality. The only difference between these two is that whereas the individual who follows the concept of Hamadust rests content with the will of God as the beloved, in the concept of Hama az ust, he longs for nothing but union with God. Since the individual soul, which is in bondage, can be redeemed only through divine love, even perfect masters who attain complete unity with God and experience him as the only reality apparently step into the domain of duality and talk of love, worship, and service of God. Divine love, as sung by Hindu masters like Tukaram, as taught by Christian masters like St. Francis, as preached by Zoroastrian masters like Azer Karvan, and as immortalized by Sufi masters like Hafiz, harbors no thought of self at all. It consumes all frailties which nourish the illusions of duality and ultimately unites the individual with God. The awakening of this divine love in the heart of the aspirant and the cleansing of his being is one of the functions of the God-man and perfect masters. The life of love of a perfect master is unperturbed by desires or duality. Once the mind of the aspirant gets a glimpse into this life of true values, it protests against the bondage of desires and the cage of the separative ego life. The perfect master acts from the truth, which he is one, and not from any limited ego consciousness. Hence, his help is more effective than all the unaided effort the aspirant himself can make. The perfect master does not give something which is not already within the aspirant in latent form. He unveils the real self of the aspirant and enables him to come into his own rightful divine heritage. Complete surrenderance to the God-man is not possible for one and all. When this is not possible, the other high roads which can eventually win the grace of God are loving obedience to and remembrance of the God-man in the best of one's ability, love for God and intense longing to see him and be united with him, being in constant company with the saints and lovers of God and rendering them wholehearted service, avoiding lust, greed, anger, hatred, and the temptations of power, fame, and fault-finding, leaving everyone and everything in complete external renunciation and in solitude, devoting oneself to fasting, prayers, and meditation. Carrying on all worldly duties with a pure heart and clean mind, and with equal acceptance of success or failure, while remaining detached in the midst of intense activity. And 7, selfless service of humanity without thought of gain or reward. In the end, all walks of life and all paths ultimately lead to the one goal, which is God. All rivers enter into the ocean regardless of the diverse directions in which they flow, and in spite of the many meanderings they may take. The high roads are important because they take the pilgrim directly to the divine destination, avoiding prolonged wanderings in the wilderness of complicated byways in which the traveler is so unnecessarily confused. The various states and stages through which the pilgrim passes on the journey to God realization may be broken down into 3 phases, which the Sufis call tariqat, marifat, and hazakat. In the first, divine knowledge is experienced on the planes of energy, as inner intuition, inspiration, and conviction.
Let's look at that asterisk before we get too far ahead.
Okay.
Thanks.
Not to be confused with ordinary intuition, inspiration, and conviction, as inner sight is not to be confused with ordinary sight. In Sufic terminology, the glimpse of divine knowledge is known as tajurbat-e tariqat and represents a transition.
تجربیات طریقت.
Could you repeat that?
تجربیات
tajurbat
طریقت.
tariqat. I may ask you to step in the next time I pronounce that.
You got it.
Tajurbati tariqat.
Yes.
And represents a transition from ordinary understanding to a condition of inner experiences of smell, sound, and sight. During this first stage of unfolding knowledge, there is a far deeper conviction about spiritual realities than is possible through the usual understanding of the worldly man. However, even this conviction is not unshakable. It bestows only a mild and wavering degree of divine knowledge. The pilgrim has now started on his spiritual journey and must face many trials. While becoming established in the first stage, many aspirants are unable to cope with the ordeals they encounter as inner sight is opened. Whatever the pilgrim encounters here is for his good, and if he has a master's guidance, he need not fear that he will be lost. Although at the climax of the first stage, tariqat, which is in the 4th plane, the one real danger of risking a fall does occur through the possible misuse of the extraordinary powers associated with this plane. During the first phase, the aspirant is disengaging himself from the enmeshment in the material realm of action and ascending to the realm of energy. This is accomplished through the gradual dissolving of the multifarious desires which chain his consciousness in the material world. Although the individual is now constantly dependent upon the finer realms of energy, mind, and divine consciousness, even while immersed in the realm of matter, still, he cannot live freely in these realms because of his continued enslavement to the gross world.
Thanks, Kath. I'll take a turn now.
Okay, thanks.
Moreover, he cannot receive in any appreciable measure the renewal which divine consciousness would pour into him due to the resistance offered by the entanglements of the dense material plane upon which he lives. Nevertheless, it is these divine radiations, meagerly felt though they be, which enable the matter-ridden mind to face suffering and make the effort to rise in the higher realms of energy and mind. At last, weary of enslavement to the gross world, the individual decides to free himself from the enticements of matter. In this moment of irrevocable decision, the individual cuts himself loose from the bondage of gross desires and ascends to the realm of energy. His will now reinforced, the individual prepares for a release of vital force far greater than was ever available to him during his bondage to the gross. The activities of the individual are now more powerful, for his actions are unhindered by the low voltage characterizing the energy of the gross realm. Often, the aspirant becomes absorbed in the new powers now available, and she realizes that she can perform miracles and other phenomena. The tendency to wish to perform miracles or to judge spiritual developments by performance of such spectacles may persist for some time. Even spiritually advanced persons find it difficult to outgrow this habit of playing with illusion. It should be clearly understood that attachment to miracles is only a continuation of the habit of playing with illusion. It is not miracles, but inner illumination, which will one day bring true freedom. In the realm of energy, the increased capacity of the individual to receive the downpouring of divine radiation gives him a greater sense of spiritual power, a larger measure of knowledge, and a deeper sense of fulfillment. Although these are as yet intermittent and fragmentary, the individual continues to carry on the physical plane, to carry on the physical plane activities of eating, drinking, and other automatic activities of physical life. But she is no longer the tormented slave of unfulfilled desires rooted in the physical functions. Although a recrudescence of desires in a milder form is still possible, she is now subject, though, to new forms of restlessness. In desperate search for enduring peace, she determines to ascend to the still higher mental sphere.
He determines, not she.
He and she determine to ascend to the still higher mental sphere upon which the realm of energy fundamentally depends for its sustenance. Having crossed to this realm, the pilgrim is now at the second phase of the journey, in which they begin to see the light of God. Unfolding divine knowledge now amounts to real illumination, and the aspirant is given knowledge of the past, present, and future. They are now fully established in the divine path, and there is no longer any risk of their falling or losing their true illumination. There are still many trials, but they face them with conviction, confidence, and resolution. This second phase occurs at a point which is called Kubuliyat, or God's acceptance of the pilgrim. Here, being endowed with illumination, they know what trials lie ahead of them, but they also know that they cannot fall from this fifth plane and are aware that they can meet any situation adequately. At a certain time, the pilgrim passes to the point described by the Sufis as Marifat and sees God as he is. This is spoken of as being the sixth plane of ascent of the individual in his conscious return to the One. It is in the mental sphere, as was the fifth plane. In the sixth plane, the freedom, joy, and illumination that the soul experiences are all greatly enhanced, as the mind is in direct contact with transcendental divine consciousness. The bliss experienced in this higher realm surpasses all possible pleasures experienced in the realms of matter or energy. There is now absolutely no resistance to the direct infusion of the unceasing radiations of light, power, wisdom, and bliss that overflow from the Godhead. The individual's happiness is unutterable, his vision undimmed, his power unrestrained, his peace undisturbed, and his understanding suffers no slightest momentary impairment. He knows no lack of any kind. He continually sees God as he is. Marian, could you unmute and continue?
All that the individual enjoys in the mental realm is still not self-sustained, but is continually supplied by the never-failing emanations from the transcendental Godhead. Although the mind is completely surcharged with the heavenly abundance which descends upon it from God, nevertheless, it constantly recognizes its utter dependence upon the renewal which comes to it from above. The higher realm of mind is no less dependent upon the transcendent Godhead than are the lower realms of energy and matter. For the individual, though enjoying perpetually the free life of the Spirit, still has not attained unity with the Godhead. He has not yet transcended duality, nor realized himself as the Infinite One. In short, man on the gross plane makes indirect use of energy and mind through the gross sphere, and he can experience only such joy, power, and knowledge as the limitations of the gross permit. Man on the subtle plane uses energy directly, but uses mind indirectly, that is, through the subtle plane. Although his joy, peace, and understanding are still severely curtailed by the fact that he cannot make direct contact with the mind itself. Man on the mental plane can use energy as well as mind directly. Thus, he enjoys immeasurable power, knowledge, and bliss. But inasmuch as these are gifts from the Godhead, he still has a sense of dependence. He experiences the attributes of divinity as reflected in the mental spheres, but they do not originate in him. Even when man is able to make direct use of the mind, he falls short of that ultimate experience of knowing himself as the infinite Godhead. Although the individual experiences uninterrupted self-fulfillment owing to his absorption in the replenishing divinity, still he must transcend the mind completely if he chooses to realize himself as the unlimited and eternal truth, power, and bliss of God. At this stage, the traveler sees God as the sole reality, but he may remain absorbed in this sight of sights, or he may cross the final gulf and become one with God. In the final and third phase of the spiritual journey, called Hakikat, man becomes one with God as the infinite truth. This realization is self-sustained. Man's consciousness is now completely one with the illimitable truth of the conscious God. The individualized soul has completely transcended the mind and established unity with the Godhead, thereby realizing itself to be the fountainhead of infinite love, infinite peace, infinite bliss, infinite power, and infinite knowledge. These attributes are now no longer received by the individualized soul as emanations from the transcendent Godhead, but are experienced as being the soul's own inalienable characteristics. Nor is this state of superabundance merely one of self-sustained and unmarred spiritual self-sufficiency. It is a spontaneous overflowing in which divine consciousness sheds the glory of its superabundant life upon one and all. In this state, God knows himself as God. The goal has been reached. To recapitulate, the realization of God as he is, has required the complete surrenderance of the false individuality of the separate I. All sense of separateness and duality is only illusion, sustained by the sanskaras, impressions, of the ego life, and expressed through lust, hate, and greed. Through a pure life of selfless love and service, and by the grace of God or a perfect master, it is possible to brush away these limiting sanskaras. By transcending the illusory veil of separateness, the individualized soul comes to know itself as identical with God, who is the sole reality. God realization, which is achieved at the end of the last phase of the first journey, and on the seventh plane of consciousness, in which the mental sphere is completely transcended, is the goal of all life. It is the reason why the entire universe came into existence. God realization is sometimes mistakenly considered to be the selfish aim of the limited individual, while in reality, there is no room for any selfishness or limited individuality in God realization. On the contrary, it is the final aim of the limited and narrow life of the separate ego. God realization not only results in the attainment by the individual of an inviolable unity with all life, but also in his dynamic expression of this final realization of truth through a spontaneous and undivided life of love, peace, and harmony. The life of the God realized is a pure blessing to all humanity. Within this state of God realization, God is known and experienced to be the only reality. And as there remains nothing further to know, one aspect of this divine consciousness is omniscience. Since God is experienced as being the only one without a second, having no rival to overcome and no limitations to transcend, the individualized soul realizes a second aspect of supreme consciousness to be omnipotence. Since God is also experienced as unconditional and spontaneous joy continually welling up within the soul, the third aspect of divine consciousness is realized to be unlimited bliss. These attributes of omniscience, omnipotence, and unlimited bliss are not divisible parts within infinity, but differentiated qualities of one indivisible infinity. Being indivisible, no one of them is in any way curtailed by another, since they interpenetrate each other completely. None can or does exist without the others.
Thanks, Marianne. Mahu, take another turn.
Yes. In God consciousness, to know is to exist as blissful power. To exist as power is to know oneself as unbounded bliss, and to experience bliss is to be permeated by divine knowledge, in which knower, known, and knowledge are all one. Any existence in which power is limited, knowledge imperfect, or joy beclouded is a product of false imagination and cannot satisfy the earnest seeker after God. Thus, in the truth consciousness of Haqiqat, God knows himself as having infinite attributes, but he has no consciousness of the universe. In a few cases, consciousness of the universe returns to the God-realized soul without in any way obscuring the totality of his divine knowledge. This first affirmation of God consciousness in the universe may be said to constitute the first journey of complete divine knowledge, known as Baqa'iyat. There's an asterisk. This is the state of the Jivan Mukta, a more complete integration into activities in the world of duality is achieved by the perfect master in the state of Gotopiyat, described below. Conscious, yes, Baqa'iyat. Conscious now of the universe through the being of the Jivan Mukta or Azad Mutlaq or Baqa Billah, God does not regard it as other than himself. Not only is his knowledge not handicapped by consciousness of the world, God's knowledge uses the shadow or creation, which it has itself created as a medium through which it finds expression. In this state of Baqa'iyat, God not only knows himself as God, but also as everything. He now experiences his own infinite attributes of omniscience, omnipotence, and unbounded bliss, also in and through the consciousness of the universe. God knows himself as being everything, and everything as being himself. His knowledge of himself includes the knowledge of everything in illusion. God enjoys the same infinite and unlimited attributes as in the first state of Haqiqat, but their expression within the illusion of duality is naturally determined by the earthly vehicle in which the individualized soul functions. The God-realized Jivan Mukta, though living in the world of duality, is aware only of the unimpaired unity which sustains and pervades the universe. Such a one experiences constantly the love which knows no limitation through time, circumstance, or mood. Though the Jivan Mukta lives and functions in the world of duality, his consciousness dwells beneath the appearance of things in the underlying reality of his self in God. In this manner, such a soul creates no cleavage between the illusory and the real world, nor does being in the world constitute for him any limitation on the spontaneous flow of divine love. On the contrary, the world with all its dual aspects become the medium through which his infinite love operates automatically. In this phase of realization, there's an asterisk about this phase of realization. Do you want to read? Yeah. For example, the Jivan Mukta state. The soul has returned to consciousness of the world of duality, but the focus of consciousness of the Jivan Mukta wanders between duality and God absorption. See God Speaks, pages 171 to 172. In this phase of realization, the individual enjoys the limitless attributes of God, but does not feel impelled to use them for the benefit of others. He has become fully conscious of his impersonal divinity, which automatically permeates and controls all aspects of the universe. And therefore, he does not feel moved to intervene in affairs of the world. Active interest in cosmic processes or activities of the illusory universe is possible only when the third journey from the Baqaiyat to Gutubiyat or Sadguru or perfect master state is completed. In this state, in this state, the fullness of divine knowledge, power, and bliss is not only experienced completely, but it is also dynamically expressed. Here, the unlimited individuality of the perfect master participates fully in the life of the entire universe. In this state, God not only knows himself as God and lives as God, but works as God, coordinating the truth he has realized with the processes of the universe.
Thanks, Mahu. Kathy, you want to take another turn? Read a little slower, please, for us. Thanks.
Could you show me the place?
Yeah, show her thus.
Whoops.
Okay. Thus, at the end of this third journey of divine consciousness, God takes active interest in the spiritual yearnings of other souls and extends his help in their onward ascent. In this state, as the perfect master, he is no longer detached from the happenings of the world. And the cosmic processes and events of the world are no longer left solely in the direction of impersonal divinity. God himself has
I'm
become
sorry, to the direction.
To the direction of impersonal divinity.
Should we just go back to the,
Yeah, let's read it again.
yeah. From here again, yeah.
Thus, at the end of this third journey of divine consciousness, God takes an active interest in the spiritual yearnings of other souls and extends his help in their onward ascent. In this state, as the perfect master, he is no longer detached from the happenings of the world and the cosmic processes and events of the world are no longer left solely to the direction of impersonal divinity. God himself has become a person who is simultaneously fully divine and fully human, and he takes under his personal conscious supervision the groping, struggling life streams within the universe. The Ketubiyat or Sadguru state, perfect masterhood, is truly a state of personal godhood. His consciousness and unlimited love impel,
That's omniscience.
okay, his omniscience and unlimited love impel the Ketub or Satguru to use his unlimited power freely for the spiritual benefit of all who deserve grace. He goes halfway to meet aspiring souls, and he accentuates their progress, communicating to them his boundless, overflowing love to the extent that they are capable of receiving it. This is a state in which God offers himself to himself in measureless abundance, in and through the universe of duality. Throughout his expression of personal interest in the life of the universe, the Sadguru never becomes entangled in duality. He is never bound in any way to the world of form in which he is expressing his dynamic and unlimited personality. When his divine game in the world of form is over, he drops the link in his own bodies, physical, subtle, and mental, with the universe, without a sense of loss or pain. He withdraws from the scene of his divinely expressed life in illusion and draws to a close his creative manifestation in the universe. Withdrawal from participation in the universe of duality does not in any way impair his consciousness of divine knowledge, nor his conscious, constant, unbreakable experience of infinite power and bliss. He continues to remain conscious reality, active in the world, constituted only action as an illusory universe.
Try that one again. Whoops.
Activity in the world constituted only action in an illusory universe. Withdrawal from it is only withdrawal from the unreal, through which he chose to manifest for the liberation of those still in bondage and is termed the fourth and last journey.
Thank you, Kathy. Very nice. We'll pick up next week here at chapter 7.